Good morning. Welcome in. We are the Out of Bounds Show, 1059 The Zone ESPN. Bundle your car and home and save with your local Farm Bureau insurance agent. Tough news coming out of Starkville, Mississippi, and UMC in Jackson. Head football coach Mike Leach had a personal health issue at his home earlier Sunday and was transferred to UMC in Jackson. That's never good. And they have called his kids in two of the four as of last night on a late Steve Robertson update. His son and one of his three daughters had made it, and they were expecting maybe the other two daughters either overnight or this morning. I think we'll know more about that in the next minute or two. So that's where we are. Thoughts and prayers with Coach Mike Leach, the Pirate, and his family. And never thought I'd be covering a story of a sitting head coach at 61 years old that's not old anymore. That age is no longer old, but who had evidently been battling pneumonia, and something went terribly wrong yesterday morning. So we welcome in Steve Robertson, genespage.com, the Boneyard Podcast. Steve joins us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Steve, what can you tell us? What is the latest on head coach Mike Leach?
Well, it's going to be a difficult day for all involved. I mean, that's the one thing that we're assured of in many respects. And, there's been so much that's happened that sometimes it's difficult to wrap your mind around it. But as I mentioned in the update, last night that, we're interviewing visitors and it's a good day. And I got a text from a donor that said, hey, there's emergency vehicles at Mike Leach's residence. And so I get on the phone, start working the normal sources, and they goes, he's had some trouble, breathing, with these bouts of pneumonia he's dealt with the last couple of months, and probably needs a breathing treatment. That happens regularly. And so you just kind of dismiss it and say, okay, well, it's not life, and that's non-life threatening, And so by the time I got home, I had half a dozen people telling me the situation was very, very serious, and that he was going to be airlifted to UMC, as you mentioned. That's never good. There's been some emergent care that has been paramount, and Bo, it's just one of those things, as you mentioned, you never thought we'd be having this conversation, but Mike Leach and his family need all the prayer that we can all muster. And my hope that as he finds a way to make it through this, but I'm just not optimistic.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show. So when you think about where they are, you got to think about the players, his family, where everybody is right now. They practiced yesterday, according to your report, and then all the coaches got the kind of position groups together and kind of tried to walk the players through what little they knew. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, pretty much. And the coaches kind of found out at the same time the players did. There were a couple people that understood that, why Leach wasn't there. I don't think they understood the gravity of the situation until Bracky Brett spoke with them after practice. And I'm told the players, handled it as well as they could. And one administrator yesterday asked me, he said, if this thing goes south, should we play the bowl game? I said, absolutely. Leach would lose his mind if that was the case. Mike would not want that. Cancel a football game? Absolutely not. But, it's been a difficult 24 hours for everybody. And I think at the end of the day is as difficult as it is for all of us. I mean, our issues are very small compared to what his family and, his coaches and their families and, players and their families. I mean, there's so many people that are impacted by this because Mike Leach is so beloved by so many people.
And I can tell you're not expecting good news at some point today.
I'm not. I'm not expecting good news. And, I was told multiple times last night by people with knowledge of the situation that Mike Leach needs a miracle. And that's basically what we're down to at this point is, Mike needs a miracle. And so we're praying and hoping for a miracle. But we also understand, too, that the reality situation, things do not appear to be positive in any way whatsoever.
Talk about the impact you've been around Leach a lot. Talk about the impact that Leach has had on the people around him. And, you kind of got this crew, this Leach crew. Not all of them are still with him, obviously, but he brought a crew with him from Washington State. But there have been other visitors come in the last 3 years to practices, bowl practices, visit with Mike, see him, coach games and so on. Just talk about the impact that Mike Leach has had.
What's amazing about that too is, you don't run into anybody in the coaching profession that doesn't have an admiration for Mike Leach. And it's not just because of the fact that, he's so personable and at times very silly. I mean, you look at his contributions to the game of college football and the popularity of the game, and people just simply respect that. And he's done it in places that don't have a lot of tradition. I mean, like Washington State, Texas Tech, Mississippi State. I mean, those are not college football blue bloods by any stretch of the imagination. But he's taken his talents to places like that and done some absolutely amazing things. I think it's one of the reasons that so many people respect him is Mike was never chasing the paycheck. He was always chasing the opportunity. And I've got a chance to know him the time he's been here. And I'll tell you, as fascinating as he is a football coach, if you ever had a chance to sit down and just talk to him about anything else other than life, he is one of those kinds of people that has very strong opinions, but he's also very well read. He's a guy that understands how life works, and he's just a fascinating guy. And, the world is a better place because Mike Leach has been in it for these last 61 years.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. Mike Leach in critical condition at UMC. I think everybody's on waiting word to see. Hopefully, miraculously, he rebounds and recovers. We're visiting with Steve Robertson, genespage.com, 247 Sports. I haven't met many people, Steve Robertson, that were as curious as Mike Leach. And, we do that as kids, and unfortunately, we lose that as adults. And that's kind of the power of being a little person at 3, 5, 7, 9 years old, how curious you are about the world. And that guy was rapid fire on asking questions. And he always wanted to know, and he would talk to anybody, right? The janitor, anybody else in the building around campus, whatever campus he was affiliated with at that time. But have you ever met a more curious person?
I don't know that I have. And it's interesting. You're talking to him about some of the places he traveled, places that he's been. It's like he went over, to the United Arab Emirates last summer, I guess it was. And I was like, well, Coach, what was that like? Oh, boring. You said a couple things here and there, and you're ready to go home. And, he's so well-traveled and so well-read and so well-spoken. But, I think you hit on a good point, too. And I think a lot of it stems from the fact that he grew up, with part of a working-class family in Cody, Wyoming. Mike Leach never thought he was better than anybody. And it didn't matter if you were another coach or the custodian, as you mentioned. He treated everybody with dignity and respect. And, there'd be visitors come to practice, and you never knew what coach was going to kind of, get kind of focused on, then there may be a person around or whatever. And, he made everybody feel like they mattered. And I don't know that a lot of people have that as part of their living legacy. But I've never in my life seen Mike Leach act or behave in a way where he acted superior to anybody else. Now, he was a competitor, but he treated everybody that he encountered with dignity and respect, and that's a wonderful thing to be able to say about a person.
Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. As far as we know, Coach Mike Leach in critical condition at UMC. And, Steve, they called in all 4 of his kids, and 2 of the 4 on your last update had made it to UMC. Is that correct?
So, yeah, his son was already here, and
okay.
It was his oldest daughter had made it last night, and then the 2 others are expected to make it today, and they'll all be together as a family, and then they've got a difficult road and difficult decisions to make, and I don't know what the medical professionals at UMC, those talented people there, are communicating with Sharon, his wife. But the information that we've received is it's going to be very, very difficult for Mike Leach to make a full recovery from this. And our thoughts and prayers go out to his family, and I can't even begin to imagine what they're dealing with, especially as public as it all is. That's the thing when you're the child of a public figure. It's a blessing and a curse. When in the best of times, you're happy to see that your dad is celebrated, and in the worst of times, you hate to see your dad be criticized. But I think everybody around the world today that loves college football loves Mike Leach, and everybody's kind of pulling in the same direction, and they want to see him pull out of this thing.
If he does recover, do you expect him to coach again?
If I had to call it today, I'd say no, Bo. I can't see it. I think, if you mentioned it, if he makes it out of this and he has the full use of his faculties, and I think that his kids are going to step in and say, Dad, this is enough. This is a big enough scare. You and Mom go down to Key West and go enjoy the rest of your life. But I would be absolutely amazed if Mike Leach ever coached in a football game again.
We've got to make this transition. Steve Robertson, genespage.com, 247 Sports. Steve, if a business owner passed away and he owned a $10 million company, they got to keep rolling. They got to keep moving ahead. There's just things to do. This program is a big program. It's an SEC program. Dr. Mark Keenum and the leadership have been searching for an athletic director. There was strong word coming out that they would name one this week. And obviously they practiced, the team practiced yesterday, but let's start with the fact that they don't have an athletic director. Do you expect Mississippi State University to have an athletic director this week? Name an athletic director this week, excuse me.
I would say in the next week to 10 days. I understand that final interviews are supposed to take place this week off campus. And now, of course, with all this that's going on, with Coach Leach, there's probably a little more emergent need to get this thing done, because you're going to be conducting a coaching search here very, very soon. And so, yeah, you got to get that part of it handled. And you hate to think in those terms, but as you mentioned, it is a business, and you can't sit around and forever and a day and just kind of drift. You got, the 21st is the opening of December signing period. You got visitors coming in this weekend, and it's almost an impossible situation for somebody. And I think, Zach Arnett being the interim makes perfect sense. And then you get your AD in, and you begin vetting candidates and kind of move forward with this thing, because the business of college football never sleeps. And unfortunately, if you like to take some time to yourself here and just kind of grieve a little bit, the reality of it is that there are a lot of other people out there they'll send out a tweet, but they'll take your recruits behind your back too. So
it's true. Steve Robertson on the Yuengling Lager guest line. We're talking Mike Leach. Had a personal health issue yesterday morning in Starkville, and then was transferred to UMC. And I think everybody's awaiting word, according to Steve and many others. It is, and when you get transferred like that, it's critical. And they have called in all four of Mike Leach's kids. He has one son and three daughters. And as of late last night, one son and a daughter were there, and the two daughters are expected to join the family, and his wife Sharon and so on. Steve, do you want to take a guess at who the next athletic director will be, or where are you on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Based on some conversations last week, I think you're basically down to maybe 3 or 4 names. I think, of course, Jared Banco is a name that's been connected and mentioned with the search since its inception. There's Laird Vietch at Memphis. It's somebody that I've heard is an incredible fundraiser and a guy that's got a lot of interest in the job. And there's John David Wicker, and I think that's a guy, obviously, it's a Mississippi State alum. And the thing that I think about with all this, the backdrop of the Lee situation too, is you may go with a candidate perhaps that knows you well. And maybe this is a time that people think, well, we need family. And to be honest with you, I think you have to resist that urge. I think you got to go get the best possible candidate and not get caught up in feelings of nostalgia or anything like that. But I believe those 3 guys are finalists. I can't say that they're the final 3 finalists. There may be 1 to 2 other candidates, but I understand there will be in-person interviews that'll take place this week, and then they'll kind of move forward with the hiring process. And that's the thing we talked about on your show is there was no need to rush this process because you didn't have a hiring process in front of you on the coaching side. So we never saw this was coming. And so now that the administration's got to act with a little more expediency.
So you hire a new head coach and a new AD and you believe immediately that AD will be searching for a new head football coach, Steve?
I suspect that all of the candidates that are vying for this job have already begun that process. It's like, hey, if I get this job at Mississippi State, will you come with me? I'm confident, and that sounds awful to think in those terms, Bo, but that's just the reality of college football. And so I'm confident in saying that anybody that is considered a finalist for this job has probably already reached out to some people that says, hey, let's kind of consider the opportunity of working together. And it sounds almost morbid. I mean, Coach Leach is still fighting for his life, and there's people out there talking about, getting his job, but that's just the reality of life.
I'm trying to figure out, let's switch gears a little bit. Steve Robertson, who's done a great job yesterday updating his fan base. You can go to genespage.com. It's the 247 Sports affiliate. Steve was probably on the phone for a good 12 or 13 hours yesterday. How many people did you talk to yesterday, Steve?
What's amazing about that, as far as actual phone conversations, probably a couple dozen. As far as text messages, I would say well over 100. I mean, it's former Mississippi State coaches and players. I mean, your Chad Bumpus and John Hevesy, and I even heard from Tom Mars yesterday. I mean, it's like I couldn't keep up with notifications on social media, and that again just kind of speaks to the love that people have for Mike Leach. That Steve, what's really going on here? What's really happening? What do we need to do? What do we need to pray for? I got that a lot too, Steve. What should we pray for? But it's a very tragic and amazing day at the same time. I think, again, it just speaks to the legacy of Mike Leach, that Mike just doesn't have enemies. I mean, he's not just this gregarious, silly uncle. That's just a guy that people genuinely loved. And it's amazing to see that. And I know there are just so many people around the country that want to see a good outcome here. And sadly, I just am not optimistic that we see one. But I do believe in God, and I do believe in miracles, and I think at this point it's in his hands.
All right, let's switch gears, talk about some of our favorite Mike Leach stories. I'm going to throw out two at you. You may have a couple. One was when he tracked a raccoon in the snow up at Washington State. He lived right off campus, so he would walk to the football offices every morning. And he tracked a raccoon one time in the snow, and he says, I was in the neighborhood, and I was just curious where this raccoon lived. There's some fresh raccoon tracks. He'd been digging at somebody's garbage, so I thought I would see where it led. Another one, and I think this is about as good as it gets. There's a reason why they only serve fruitcake once a year, because it's awful. There's a reason why they only serve mint juleps once a year, because they're awful. And there's a reason why they only serve candy corn once a year, because it's awful. Anything come to mind, Steve Robertson?
Yeah, the candy corn thing, I remember when we had that discussion. Of course, one thing that's kind of an irritation to me is all these people that want to go viral. You know what I mean? Like they don't just do their jobs. They've got to go ask the question, hey, Mike, what's your favorite Animaniac? Do you like sweet tea? I mean, that stuff is just so silly, and I think in many respects demeaning and disrespectful. But what's interesting to me about the Leach stuff is like the Swing Your Sword book. I mean, when during the quarantine, I read everything in that book, and I even went and tracked down some of the characters, and I interviewed them and had them kind of frame up the Mike Leach experience. And there was a young guy that Mike Leach was coaching a Little League baseball team while he was in high school. I mean, he's only a few years older than these guys. And there was this guy that he was terrible. He was a terrible baseball player. But Mike continued to work with him. And then lo and behold, they get in some big game at the end, and the game finds you at your weakest moment, right? So with the game on the line, this terrible kid comes up and gets a game-winning hit. And so I talked to him as an older person. He's a grown man now. He goes, man, that's one of the best moments of my life. He said, it changed my life. He said, it gave me confidence because Mike believed in me, and I came through in the big moment. I think he said he may only had 2 or 3 hits his entire Little League career, and one of them happened to be a game that I think captured first place for him. And what's amazing is after I had written that story, the guy reached out to me a week or 2 later, and he goes, "Hey, I just want you to know that Coach Leach reached out to me. I hadn't talked to him in years. He wanted to make sure I had your story." And again, just shows how thoughtful Coach Leach is. But you go back to the fact that he's a high school kid out there coaching Little League kids and does something that becomes a life-defining type moment for a kid that was not a very good baseball player, but ended up being a pretty good person because of the experience.
I think he took the Iowa Westland job for $3,000 a year.
Yeah, and that's a funny story too. That what's amazing about that is he talked about that so many times with such glee in his voice about, Sharon thought she was marrying some Pepperdine educated lawyer. Next thing you know, she's in a little rental house having to eat in cafeteria and vacuum the shag carpet every day. It's like, he goes, it was this bait and switch thing with her. And he told me before, he goes, that's one of the reasons that I worked so hard for her. He said, because she stood by me. He said, how many women would have stood by me? They're dating this guy. He's going to law school. And because in the end, I'm like, I'm not going to be a lawyer. I'm going to go coach, college football for next to nothing and peanuts. So let's go. And he loves his wife. And that's one of the things too, that I think maybe he doesn't talk about a lot, but he's always including her in everything. It's like sometimes he'd call late at night and Sharon do this and Sharon and I are doing this. And that's something that maybe he kept a little more private than people maybe fully appreciate, but he loved his wife, Sharon, and loves his wife, Sharon. And I think that his respect goes back to the fact that she supported him chasing his dream. Mm-hmm. That a lot of other women would have said, you know what, this is what I signed up for. I'm out of here. But she stuck with him, and, it's been an amazing ride for the both of them. And I think that is probably something we'll hear a lot more about here in the days to come.
Steve Robertson, genespage.com, 247 Sports, the Boneyard Podcast. Steve joined us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Steve, I know it's a tough day for you. I know that you and Mike had cultivated a close relationship, and Mike could do that with the media, knowing that we were going to have to constructively criticize him, but he would also hang out with you, which is rare this day and age. You did a great job yesterday. I know it's going to be a tough day today and maybe for the foreseeable future, but we appreciate your time today, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy.
Steve Robertson, genespage.com, 247 Sports. He had an update late last night. You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Woo! Brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your car and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent, Mike Leach, in critical condition at UMC. We'll tell you what we know throughout the show. Now, Tom Luganville is going to share some unbelievable stories at 8:30 on the coach that he has known for 20 years that absolutely changed the game of college football and NFL for that matter.